Lines.
Welcome back to Fault Lines on Radio Sputnik. I am Melik Abdul, joined in studio with Jamal Thomas coming out of our station here in Washington, D.C. As we always say, if you guys just so happen to find yourself in the DMV, you can check us on 105.5 FM and 1390 AM. And if you're in Kansas City, tune in to 1140 AM, 102.9 and 104.7 on your radio dial. If you guys are feeling what we're bringing to you each and every day, you can check us out on Rumble or Twitter or even now TikTok, where you can like and share the audio or video. And if you want to join in on the conversation, you can do that by phone at 202-521-1320. Again, 202-521-1320. Your engagement helps make the show what it is, so please don't be shy. Well, if you guys didn't know, there was an election and Pennsylvania just held their primaries, and Maryland's primary, I believe, is coming up in a couple of weeks. But to talk about what's happening on the political field with the congressional races, maybe a bit about the White House, the road to the White House, we have Bernie Flowers. Bernie Flowers is a candidate for U.S. Congress, Maryland's 3rd District. Bernie, good morning. How are you?
Mr. Abdul, thank you so much for having me. I am really excited to be on your program.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much for joining us. I appreciate your team actually reaching out to us. So let's just jump into the congressional races. So Maryland is interesting this cycle. For one, we have Kim Klacik, who ran in 2020. She ran in 2020, but she's now in a district that has been redistricted.
You are correct.
Yeah, she's actually running again this cycle. We have Larry Hogan, who seems to be the presumptive Republican nominee. He'll be competing against either, I think, David Trone or Angela Alsobrooks in the upcoming Maryland primary. But we also have your race as well. We could just start there about how we can start with your race, obviously, but just talk about what's happening in Maryland, the possibilities for pickups this cycle.
Well, I think that personally, as a Republican and a minority, I know I hate to bring that up, but the bottom line
that's
is
okay.
I'm an American first, but the issue of the day is here in District 3, which is Howard County, portions of Anne Arundel County, north of Highway 32, and a small portion of Carroll County. It's a pretty big district, but the issue of the day is John Sarbanes, the incumbent Democrat, had been there for 18 years, and they had carved out that district for him. And before that, his father was in that district. So basically, you've got 2 generations of Democrats that basically held that seat. And now things are different. With that redistricting that you spoke of, with Kim Klacik, well, that goes all over the state. We were the most gerrymandered state in the entire union for quite some time. And those districts were carved out, in my opinion, to favor Democrats. So now the federal government redistricted us, and now we're in a position that we can have an opportunity to win for the conservatives. Notice I didn't say just the Republicans, the conservatives, because I personally, believe that we can win. And these things are just a lot different this time. And so we're out here fighting the good fight. I've got, if I'm not mistaken, 31 candidates. And I can tell you that when I jumped into the race in the first week of October, I was expecting to face John Sarbanes. And for some reason, maybe 3 weeks into the race, he decided that he wasn't going to run again for whatever reason. So that makes that seat an open seat that can be won by either Democrats, Republicans, or independents. And so, again, I was the very first candidate that was expecting to face him. And now I've got 31 opponents that just jumped in kind of like also ran.
Wait, did you say 31 opponents?
I believe I did. And so there is about, I'm at a debate pretty much every night. I was at one last night, and I've got, I think 6 other Republican opponents that have jumped into the race. And of course, our primary is 14 May. And I'm listed as the Republican front runner for whatever that means. But the issue of the day is the rest of those people are Democrats that we probably never even heard of. There are a couple of known state senators that are jumping into this. And one of the opponents, I won't mention his name, has raised $3 million to run in this race. So most of his money, matter of fact, all of his money, according to the SEC, has come from out of the state of Maryland. So they're trying to buy the race. But the bottom line here is I'm a grassroots candidate. I'm a military officer, retired. I spent a lot of time in the federal government as a senior civilian. And what I saw within my time as my last job was as a senior advisor to Secretary Mayorkas. And the bottom line is what I saw was against the American people. And I'm trying to do something about it. And that's why I'm running.
Explain that. So you were in Mayorkas's office?
Yep.
What were you doing with Mayorkas?
I was the U.S. NORCOM/NORAD senior advisor. So my job was to represent U.S. NORAD and U.S. NORCOM. There are a lot of ties there because our job, NORAD and U.S. NORCOM, if you're not familiar, is responsible for defending the homeland, just as DHS is, and we work together. And so that border problem that we have with 10 million undocumented immigrants is something that's near and dear to my heart because I helped work it. And for some reason, our government is bringing people into the United States that are unvetted and undocumented. And one of the problems I have is while we were being forced to get COVID, this jab, whatever, people were coming to our country that were unvetted, so they weren't having to get the jab. So I get a real problem with that. Again, we brought 85,000 Afghans into the country. People don't know about that, or they've forgotten about it after the Afghan retrograde. 85,000 Afghans, $1,400 a day, $119 million a day unbudgeted. People don't know about that. And again, I was in the office helping along with that, representing NORCOM and the Pentagon. And we took budget money that was budgeted for the Pentagon and gave it to DHS in order to administer these people that were coming in that were brought into the country, as I remember, unvetted. So imagine you've taken the COVID shot. The government's telling that this is going to save you, and everybody has to take the shot except for those that are coming in from other countries. They are unvetted. And then the security concerns. A lot of those people, they're wonderful people, I'm sure, but there's always going to be a bad apple or two when you bring in 10 million people into your country within the matter of about a year.
And you're right about that. And the question, how do you adjust for that? Even, we may be, obviously talking about a small number of people with some type of nefarious intent. But if you were just kind of putting on your thinking cap for a minute, let's say you were appointed to, whether that's under Joe Biden or President Trump. Obviously, I'm since I'm a Republican, I'm rooting for President Trump return. But
of course,
what would you, if you were appointed to some type of presidential council or something the goal is to seriously address the issue at the border. Like, what would you be looking at as far as a
Mayorkas's job?
Oh, well.
Let's say you were in Mayorkas's.
With Mayorkas, he has to follow whatever
Biden dictates.
Right.
That's
so
that's true.
If you were just part of a council where you're essentially just, because of your expertise, you're giving your advice, what would you focus on? And I know, obviously, the border security is definitely a component of that, but it's such a, it's such a big topic with so much underneath that. It's like the big umbrella. So when people say border security, there's a lot that goes under there. It isn't just building a wall. It's, drones and all sorts of things. What would you focus on if you were part of this presidential council?
Thanks for asking me that question. With my military background, I've been exposed to all sorts of things that the government can do to secure a border. And I can tell you that we are securing borders in other countries. We're giving them, this literal $90 billion that we're sending to the Ukraine and preparing for a war in Gaza, preparing for war in Taiwan. A lot of that is about border security. And so with that said, what would I do? Well, first, we should have given Mr. Trump the $5 billion that he asked for to build our wall. There's all kinds of things you can do. Of course, you want to build a physical wall, but there's also electronic means and, as you mentioned, drones and other things, non-lethals that you can do that will very, very, very securely make sure that people don't cross that wall. I don't want to get into a lot of classified things, but the technology certainly exists. And we need to educate the public because those people are coming over here and they're going to take jobs away. Now, I was at a function with one of the black fraternities in Howard County, and I mentioned that to some of the people I was talking to, and they said, well, these are jobs that black people don't want. Well, that may be true, but everybody's not an educated person. Everybody doesn't have a skill set where they can go open up a computer and open a business or go work for whomever. Some people are just regular old hands-on workers. And in my opinion, a lot of those people are coming in to replace the lower-end workers in the minority communities that rely on those low-end, low-wage jobs. And I don't think that's fair to the American people. And another problem, think about Baltimore. Think about Anacostia. If we can send billions of dollars over to the Ukraine for their benefit, then we're even paying their civil servants. And we can't fix Baltimore?
I'm curious, as a Republican, how would you go about that? I mean, because under normal circumstances, Republicans don't believe in putting money into stuff like this.
Yes, we do.
Do you?
Yes, we do.
Since when? Since when?
Every president does. If you go and look at the policies that, for instance, like a Greg Abbott down in Georgia, the thing that he's doing around minority businesses, development, education, like they always do these things. We may not lead as far as the talking points because we kind of get bogged down in culture wars. But when it comes to policies, Republicans around the country, even the Trump administration,
I'm super skeptical of this. But putting my skepticism to the side, I'm super skeptical of that. What would you do though? Like, meaning, what is? Look, like I always say, Malik, I am an aspirational politics guy. I love it when we're going to come in and do X and Y. And we're going to have a contract with America, and this is what we're going to do. You can hold us accountable to so and so. I love that. Regardless of what side it's coming from, at the very least want to know the intentions and the point that the person is trying to do, because at the very end, you could say, did they accomplish their objectives or not? When it's just political language, there's no way to know. What would the Republican plan for Maryland be?
Well,
because I agree with you. I agree with your premise. What's the other one? Scalick, or the other black woman Republican who was walking through Maryland?
Kasich.
I agree with the basic premise that, look, if we're going to send $90 billion abroad, are you telling me we can't deal with our own communities? I agree with the basic premise. I guess the question is, what does it mean in practice?
What does it mean in practice? Well, I'm an America First guy. And I can tell you from my background, traveling all over the world, doing dirty deeds for Uncle Sam, that we are well involved, far too involved in other people's business. We overturn countries. Bottom line, I know this, I shouldn't say this, but, we say that we're the arsenal of democracy. Well, what we do in practice is we go and overturn other countries and take their resources and involve themselves in things. And there's a reason with us. And you can't continue to do that for over 100 years and not expect some sort of blowback. As example, the country of Iran. They're angry with us. Well, people don't understand that the Shah of Iran was a plant by our American government in order to get their oil. That happened in 1949, if I'm not mistaken.
I forget the exact year, but yeah, the Brits and the U.S. Iran wanted to basically use more of their oil. 1952. And we didn't like it. We install a dictator Shah. Jimmy Carter goes out, says the man is a great man. He's a Democratic guy. Jimmy Carter's out there shilling for the guy. And he's overturned. He's overthrown.
Yeah, right.
And we turn around and say, well, how dare Iran do this? Overthrow our dictator. And we're angry with Iran for doing so. It's the weirdest thing in the world. It's super weird.
We've been doing this for a very, very, very...
I appreciate the point of view. I guess my thing is, but what is it in practice?
Well, what is it in practice for somebody like me? First of all, I'm a big fan of Ken Cliff, a friend of mine. She's running in District 2. I'm running in District 3, and there's some other ones. But the bottom line is we need to change things. What does this mean in practice? Well, notice, the United States government, Mr. Joe Biden, is in the process of hiring 87,000 new IRS agents, armed. Now, why does an IRS agent need to be armed? I say, let's hire 87,000 Customs and Border Patrol agents. And these people that have come here, that we have led into this country, let's say we identify them. We make sure that we know who they are. We vet them. And those that don't pass our vetting process, we send them back where they came from.
I know, but what does that have to do with Maryland?
Well, it has a lot to do with Maryland because jobs are being taken away. And if you notice that, when somebody comes into the state of Maryland or any state in the union, they may not have immediate voting privileges, but they're counted in the census.
What are the jobs that you think are being taken away by immigrants? I'm just curious.
The lower end jobs that are usually given to blacks, let's just say.
But you would agree with me that your friend, when he pointed out that blacks don't want those jobs, you agree with him. You even said that you agree.
I would agree with you, and that is fine. However, there's a lot of jobs in agriculture. There's a lot of jobs that people don't know about. Transportation, things, those lower end type deals that, people work and, they're working hourly. Well, if these big companies, all these corporations don't have to pay a minimum wage, and these immigrants that are going to come in, they're not going to complain about being mistreated. They're just going to do the work. And in the meantime, okay, you look into Walmart, you walk in there and you find out that most of the products are made somewhere else. And so after a while, the black community is being, and not just the black community, the lower end community, which might be whites, Indians, whatever racial, group, they're not going to be able to find work. And remember, we are every citizen in the United States owes $266,000 to the Federal Reserve. Most people don't know that. We are $35 trillion in debt. We are borrowing money from the Federal Reserve to pay the bills of other countries. And a lot of these countries.
No, please go ahead.
No. I've just seen it up close. And I know that just like if you have a household credit card, at some point that credit card is going to have to be paid. That's where we are with the Federal Reserve. At one, I pull our card and they're going to say, okay, pay up. I don't want to see that day. And I'm trying to stop it. But it all comes together. The issue is we should not be paying the bills of other countries. And this idea of sending all this money to Ukraine, well, bottom line is we made some agreements back after the wall fell. And, to me, I like it to the Cuban Missile Crisis. When the Russians wanted to install missiles into Cuba, we almost went to nuclear war. So what we have done is we've engaged ourselves like a reverse Marshall Plan. And we put ourselves in a situation where we're defending the Ukraine and we're putting money in there like crazy. But again, our inner cities are suffering. And that is where most Black people live. And I got a real problem with that. I wrote a book about it called Black Values Matter. And I hope people will check it out. But the bottom line is I've seen a lot of this stuff and I believe in America first. And this racial division that seems to be propagated by our elites, it's not going to do us any good.
Totally agree with you there. And just as the point that you were making about how, in the labor industry, so the construction industry is a big one. Because here in D.C., what our council had to do, they ended up passing laws because what was happening is that a number of businesses that were got D.C. contracts, for one, they weren't hiring D.C. residents. They were hiring a number of residents. And you would see from Virginia and Maryland and other places, a number of them were maybe from South America, Mexico, and other places like that. And because of them, they weren't interested in joining unions. And so what happened is, and this is part of the legislation here in D.C., it ended up suppressing the wages overall because they were willing to accept a much lower pay. So to your point about how there is a connection there, absolutely right. Bernie, thank you so much. We're going to have you back to talk more because this is a great conversation. Bernie Flowers, candidate for U.S. Congress, Maryland's 3rd District and veteran, thank you for your service. So we're going to be back on the other side of the break to talk about the latest, what's happening. Just give us an update on what's happening with China, maybe even about Blinken here. Stick with us. We'll be back on the other side of the break.
Fault lines.